In the 7th century, the sudden death of King Sasanka plunged Bengal into a brutal, devastating power vacuum. For 100 years, the region was consumed by internal strife. Local warlords fractured the delta into petty, warring states, leaving the population exhausted and the economy in ruins. By 750 AD, the leading figures of Bengal took a step that was virtually unheard of in the medieval world. They held an election. Together, they chose a military leader named Gopala to be their sole ruler. This collective act of will ended a century of suffering. By establishing leadership through consensus rather than conquest, the people of Bengal birthed the Pala Empire. This map illustrates the scale of the empire's growth under the early kings, who pushed the borders from the icy peaks of the Himalayas all the way to the arid plains of Sindh. The Pala kings were practicing Buddhists who utilized state patronage to build religious and educational institutions across their territory. Despite their personal devotion, they maintained a policy of tolerance that protected Hindu and Muslim subjects alike. They also prioritized the restoration of intellectual centers. At sites like Nalanda University, they rebuilt ancient brick monasteries to house thousands of international scholars and students. This pragmatism extended to the sea. By opening safe areas for early Muslim merchants along the coast, the Palas turned Bengal into a hub for trade and diplomacy. Military expansion, state-sponsored education, and religious pluralism combined to create a period of deep stability and cultural growth for the Delta. That stability reached its peak under King Devapala. When his reign ended, the empire's internal strength began to erode. A succession of passive kings struggled to maintain control. Internal rebellions by local chiefs soon began to fracture the empire's cohesion from the inside out. This map shows the resulting collapse as rival powers like the Gujara Pratiharas seized territory in the west. The Pala borders rapidly receded, eventually confining the dynasty to the Bengal Delta. Decades of stagnation and internal rot left the region vulnerable to any force strong enough to challenge the throne. That force came from the south. The Senas, a warrior clan from Karnataka, had migrated to Bengal and slowly built a military power base in the shadows of the fading Palas. In the 12th century, King Vijayasena launched a final military campaign. His armies swept across the delta, ending 5 centuries of Pala rule. To solidify their new authority, the Senas commissioned the Deopara Prashasti. This stone inscription eulogized the dynasty, casting their violent takeover as a divine restoration of order. This inscription functioned as a permanent public reset of the region's historical memory. By carving a narrative that identified Vijayasena as the true founder of Bengali glory, the Senas delegitimized the 5 centuries of Pala history that preceded them. With their power secure, the Senas moved to replace the region's pluralistic culture with strict orthodox Brahmanism. They enforced a rigid social hierarchy known as Kulinism. This system granted elite status to a select few while creating new, exclusionary barriers for the rest of the population. The inclusive era of the Palas was over. By marginalizing large portions of their own subjects based on caste and faith, the Senas destroyed the internal unity of the Delta. This state-enforced schism left the population alienated. When a real external threat finally arrived, the kingdom's defenses were hollow and its people had little reason to fight for their rulers. The end came in 1204 at the capital city of Nadia. The Sena court was completely unprepared for the speed of the approaching vanguard. A general named Bakhtiar Khilji led a daring surprise attack. Just 18 Turkish horsemen burst through the palace gates, catching the guards in a state of absolute shock. The panic was total. The elderly king Lakshmana Sena was forced to flee the palace on foot, leaving his kingdom behind in a single afternoon. 5 centuries of indigenous rule collapsed because the Senas had built a society too divided to defend itself. Despite this sudden fall, the Pala and Sena epic forged the linguistic and cultural foundations of Bengal just before the onset of the Islamic era. For more deep dives into the history of the subcontinent, like, share, and subscribe to Akhara Study. Thanks for watching.